Hey, I'm Olajide Paris, and in this video, I'm going to walk you through an emotional dramatic cue that I've composed using UVI's Augmented Orchestra. Now, full disclosure, I did work very extensively on this product with UVI, and UVI has sponsored this video, but all of the opinions and everything that goes into this video is completely my own. With that being said, link in the description to Augmented Orchestra, as well as the other products I use, and get my free composer's gear buying guide in the link as well. Let's jump right in. So this piece actually starts out with a sketch with just piano and a harp. And for the harp, I'm using the harp from the UVI Orchestral Suite, which is an older but still very relevant product from UVI's catalog. And for the piano, I'm using the Austrian Grand piano, which I believe you can get also as a part of Key Suite or on its own. And again, links to these products in the description below. So let's have a listen just to this kind of duet of the melody featuring the harp and the piano. Okay, so that is what I started with when I was composing the piece. In fact, the way that I actually composed this was melody in the harp, melody in the piano, melody in the harp, melody in the piano. And so I knew that I wanted this interplay between the harp and the piano featuring the melody. And then I went back and I harmonized the parts against each other to make sure that they worked on their own. And one of the tools I used to do that was the marker track. Of course, Logic Pro doesn't have a chord track. So the way that I like to do things, of course, I can do harmonies on paper, but I like to just have the chords up in a marker track. And because there's multiple marker tracks in Logic, I could easily have different markers for chords versus different markers for the actual sections of the piece. So I've arranged my chords after figuring out the harmonies that I want. F major and B major in the beginning. Those are a tritone relationship from each other. Excuse me, there we go. Very Debussy-esque. In the middle section here, I go minor between B flat minor, F minor, which is a fourth relationship, A flat minor, E flat minor, again in fourths, so. Then B flat minor to F minor. And then finally, it goes from this A flat to a major third at the end. And you will hear that when it gets to the orchestra. So first the melody is sketched. Then I go on to kind of give myself some cues here in the marker track so that I can keep track of the harmonies. And so the next part of the process here was to fill these out with chords. So one of the really cool things about the Augmented Orchestra is that this is one of those libraries where it's a sketching tool, and it's for kind of more epic and cinematic and writing really kind of fast. It's not really, really small, detailed sections. We recorded high strings and low strings separately, high brass, low brass, high winds, low winds, but we also did record the entire orchestra. So what you have here is not only a selection of articulations for the sections themselves, but the orchestra. So the very first thing I did was, you can see here over in the orchestra section, we have the chords, and there's two flavors of chords, not two flavors, but there's two categorizations, not just of chords, but of all the patches or most of them. The ones with the V to the left Those are velocity based, meaning the harder you press, the higher the velocity of the MIDI event, the louder the sample that is triggered. And then the W ones are attached to the mod wheel, so you can velocity crossfade between layers and can have more control over the dynamics. So the very first thing I did here was, after sketching out the chords, I used a single chords patch, so that what you're going to hear is all just one patch, to realize the harmony of the entire piece. So here's the piece with the orchestral chords and the harp and piano. Okay, so that's how that sounds. And so as you can see, the nice thing about Augmented Orchestra is that with that kind of a patch, you can very quickly and easily test different chord ideas. And within one patch, we have major and minor, and we have other variations of chords, different inversions and different types of chords in other patches. But you could see how this can be a really great writing tool or sketching tool. Now, I could have ended there. Of course, I have my melody, I have my orchestra, and if I was really in a pinch or I was really trying to work fast, then that might be as much as I could do at the time. But I did decide to take things further, just to kind of show how you could use the Augmented Orchestra to actually create an authentic, really intimate piece, because although it's a large number of musicians, large sections, there's still a lot of nuance that you can have here. So let's get started with the strings. So the first thing I've done here is I don't give it all away at once. I want to build dynamics through orchestration, bring things in and out, and have opportunities to build up dynamically. So first we start off with the harmonics. Okay. And in this section here, I add the sustained strings unison in the lower register along with the strings pizzicato, which sound like this. And finally, the winds. These are wind arc longs, so these are arcs that were recorded, so they're not just straight sustains, but there's actually a crescendo and decrescendo. There's a shape to these, and that together sounds like this. So now here in this middle section, these are strings sustained with the mod wheel. And we add the winds as well. And just to talk a little bit about the orchestration here, we have the kind of high mid strings together, and then down here, it's kind of simulating even though it's unison, it's kind of like the cellos part down here in the lower register. And you can see that these are separated by almost an octave, the same way that I would do if I were writing for individual sections. And the winds are similar. You've got the upper winds here with the mid winds, and then the lower winds just kind of playing the bass. And just one theoretical note here. I'm a big fan of using common tone connections anytime there's an opportunity to connect two chords by a common note, meaning a note that's shared between two different chords. I like to take that option. In the case here where we're kind of jumping a fourth, we can see that there's a note that's shared in between here. It's the A flat between the chords that gets shared. And so I always enjoy anytime I have an opportunity to do that because it makes for a smooth transition. So, and that this section together sounds like. Next, we have the string harmonics coming in very, very softly. Longer chords in octaves. So these are basically the basses and cello playing in octaves together. So together we have this in the string section. One thing I want to talk about here is how I've achieved the soft, intimate sound. It is a little bit challenging when you're working with all the string section together. It's a string section of 60 or 45 musicians. I don't remember the number exactly. But if I take a look here, you can see that there's the mod wheel data where I'm shaping in the dynamics of the performance, of course. But then I'm also using expression a lot. Here I've got the expression at 80 to just bring the volume down on the harmonics, and it's being used even more aggressively on the sus patch. So here, modulation is just giving general shape to the phrases, and you can see I'm doing a nice kind of crescendo here. But in the expression, I'm controlling things further to make sure that it's just really, really, really super quiet. And this might seem a little bit extreme, but this is when you have a patch that's so big on its own, this is the way that you can control the dynamics and really make them your own, and you can have a more intimate sound despite using a really kind of epic sounding patch. Okay, so moving on to the final section, we have the string harmonics again. Just A flat major chord. And then the same with the sustains. So we've got string sustains. We've got a big, wide chord spaced across. Oh, sorry, I've got the wrong MIDI here. Yeah. So this is a pretty full chord that's spaced across many octaves. We have the lower strings separated by an octave here. I'm thinking that of the mid strings of that as the mid strings, cello and violas, and then violins up here. It sounds like this. Okay. And here you can see that I actually did draw in a manual modulation curve to create a crescendo, and expression-wise, I did allow the expression to ride up along with the modulation so that I could have that kind of maximum volume at the end. Here we have the winds, another nice big winds chord. Now, I am using the wind arcs, and these have a natural dynamic to them, but I still did opt to draw in my own expression data too, to give a little bit more shape to the crescendo. But anyway, this sounds like this. And this is again a nice widely spaced chord, and octaves in the bottom, and then more space in the middle, and things get closer as you get to the top. This is just a way that I like to space the chords. Of course, we have the pre-orchestrated patches. We even have winds chords and brass chords. But if you have a certain sound that you want in mind, in terms of how you want the chords to voice, then playing it on your own really is the way to go. Although it's great to have the pre-made chords as a sketching tool. Speaking of which, I did use the pre-made brass chords, which are nice and well balanced right at the scoring stage. And the brass chord sounds like this. Of course, I've got my expression giving shape to the chord, and I've got the modulation wheel as well. And all together, we have this. Last but not least, I want to share a couple of tips that you can use, especially when you're creating a really dramatic piece, to give a more human feel to your orchestra. So the first thing is to do with tempo. So let's take a look at my tempo track here. You can see that I'm starting at an initial tempo of 120, and that at various points in the piece, I'm decreasing the tempo, either with a slow ramp that's gradual, and then bringing it back up, accelerating, decelerating again. I go down all the way to 95 to really create this feeling of rubato and almost like stopping at the end of phrases. And what I find is that, especially when you're writing slow and dramatic pieces of music, that this really helps to evoke a more human feel. The other thing I want to show you here is some of the automation. And if you do want a full video on mixing this type of music, please leave a comment in the below. Tell me that you'd like me to do that, because I could do a video on that as well. But yeah, there's quite a bit of automation between the orchestra. Of course, I have all of the orchestral elements routed to a bus so that I can control the balance between the orchestra and the piano and harp, because of course, when you have a big orchestra that's realized with huge sections of instruments, you can easily throw things off balance between a piano and a harp. So the sections where I really want to feature the melody of either the piano or the harp, I'm really pulling the orchestra back by as much as 10 dB, you can see, and then really manipulating that to create a sense of dynamics. And similarly with the piano, less so than the harp. The harp was a little bit more consistent, and I was able to just kind of leave things at unity gain or -7, whatever it is. But yeah, pulling the piano back at certain points and bringing it up at certain points in the mix did help create that interplay. And then last but not least, just the expression and modulation data. You can see here very extensively that there's a lot of modulation data using the mod wheel and expression as well. And all of that really helps to shape the dynamic and the emotional arc of the music. So I hope you enjoyed that video. Again, please find the links to these products in the description below. Grab my free Composer's Gear Guide also in the description below, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.